you are exhausted, not from the physical labor of the day, but from the endless pursuit of a happiness that always feels just one achievement away. What if true peace isn't about acquiring more, but mastering what's inside? 2,000 years ago, the Stoics unlocked this exact secret. We live in an era of unprecedented comfort, yet we are plagued by unparalleled anxiety. We have supercomputers in our pockets, instant access to all the world's knowledge, and conveniences that emperors of old could not have fathomed. Yet, if you look around, you will see a world desperately starved of peace. We chase the next promotion, the next purchase, the next fleeting hit of dopamine, convinced that this time the destination will finally bring us lasting happiness. It rarely does. Over 2 millennia ago, in the bustling marketplaces of Athens and the marble halls of the Roman Empire, a radical philosophy was born. Stoicism was not a religion, nor was it a mere academic theory debated by old men in ivory towers. It was a fiercely practical operating system for life. It was stress-tested by slaves enduring torture, merchants who lost everything at sea, and emperors bearing the crushing weight of the known world. The Stoics discovered that happiness is not a byproduct of external circumstances. It is not something you find. It is something you construct, brick by brick, within the fortress of your own mind. To live a truly happy, resilient, and unshakable life, you do not need the world to comply with your wishes. You only need to master your own perceptions. What follows is a roadmap. We're going to explore the 12 non-negotiable things you need to know to live a happy life, broken down through the lens of history's greatest Stoic minds. Here are the first 3 parts of that journey. If you want to build a house that can withstand a hurricane, you do not start with the roof. You start with the foundation. In Stoicism, the foundation of a happy life rests entirely on understanding where your power begins and exactly where it ends. 1. Master the dichotomy of control. Imagine being born into a life where you do not even own your own body. This was the reality for Epictetus, a man born into slavery in Hierapolis, Phrygia, during the 1st century AD. His master, Epictetus, was known to be cruel and volatile. Legend has it that one day, in a fit of rage, Epictetus began twisting Epictetus's leg. Epictetus did not scream. He did not beg. He simply looked at his master and said calmly, "If you keep twisting, you will break my leg." His master ignored the warning and snapped the bone. Epictetus, looking at his newly shattered limb, simply replied, "Did I not tell you that it would break?" Epictetus lived the rest of his life with a severe limp, yet he became one of the most revered philosophers in history, a man who possessed more profound freedom than the emperor of Rome himself. How? Because he mastered what is now called the dichotomy of control. Epictetus realized that the universe is divided into 2 distinct categories: things that are up to us and things that are not. Our thoughts, our choices, our judgments, and our character are entirely up to us. Everything else, our health, our wealth, our reputation, the actions of other people, the traffic on our morning commute, the economy, is ultimately outside of our direct control. Most of human suffering is a direct result of confusing these 2 categories. We tie our happiness to the promotion we might not get, the partner who might leave us, or the public opinion that can shift like the wind. When you hinge your peace of mind on things you cannot control, you make yourself a hostage to fortune. You become a slave to the world. To live a happy life, you must draw a massive, impenetrable wall between what is yours and what is the world's. When a crisis strikes, your first question must always be, Is this up to me? If the answer is yes, take action. If the answer is no, you must view it as you would the weather. You cannot yell at a rainstorm to stop. You can only choose to open an umbrella. True freedom and true happiness is the immediate dismissal of anything outside your circle of control. 2. Conquer the kingdom of your imagination. Seneca the Younger was one of the wealthiest men in the Roman Empire. He was a brilliant playwright, a financial titan, and the primary advisor to the Emperor Nero. Yet, despite his immense power and privilege, Seneca lived his entire adult life with a sword dangling over his head. Nero was deeply paranoid, cruel, and unpredictable. Seneca knew that at any given moment, a messenger could arrive at his estate with an imperial decree ordering him to take his own life. If anyone had a reason to lie awake at night consumed by anxiety, it was Seneca. He was surrounded by political backstabbing, shifting allegiances, and the constant looming threat of execution. Yet, Seneca observed something profound about human nature, something entirely applicable to our modern lives. He wrote to his friend Lucilius, "There are more things, Lucilius, likely to frighten us than there are to crush us. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Think about the last time you were truly panicked. Perhaps you made a mistake at work and spent the entire weekend agonizing over the belief that you would be fired on Monday. You imagined the conversation, the humiliation, the financial ruin. You lived through the pain of being fired 1,000 times in your mind. But when Monday arrived, your boss simply pointed out the error and asked you to fix it. The catastrophe never happened. We are biologically wired to anticipate danger. It is an evolutionary survival mechanism. But in the modern world, this mechanism has gone into overdrive. We invent ghosts, phantoms, and worst-case scenarios, and our bodies react to these mental fictions as if they were physical threats. We ruin our actual, peaceful present by dragging imagined, disastrous futures into it. Seneca advised that to be happy, you must pull yourself out of the dark corridors of your imagination and ground yourself in the objective facts of the present. Stop suffering before you need to. If the worst does happen, you will face it with the same strength you are using to breathe right now. But until it happens, refuse to pay interest on a debt you may never owe. Once you understand what you can control and have tamed your imagination, the next step in the Stoic journey is changing the lens through which you view the world. The events of your life are objectively neutral. It is your perception of those events that colors them as good or bad. 3. Amor fati. Love your fate. Marcus Aurelius was arguably the most powerful man on earth. As the emperor of the Roman Empire, he had absolute authority, but his reign was anything but a peaceful luxury. He spent nearly 2 decades dealing with endless wars on the Germanic frontier, a treacherous betrayal by his most trusted general, and the devastating Antonine Plague, which wiped out millions of his citizens. On top of this, he suffered the unimaginable grief of burying several of his own children. If Marcus had looked at his life and said, "Why is this happening to me? This is unfair," no one would have blamed him. But Marcus did not believe in merely accepting his fate with a heavy sigh. He believed in loving it. This concept, later coined by Friedrich Nietzsche as amor fati, a love of fate, is central to Stoic happiness. Marcus wrote in his private journal, "A blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it. Think of a small candle. If you blow on it, the wind will extinguish it. But if you have a roaring bonfire, the exact same wind will only fuel it, making it burn brighter and fiercer." Amor fati is the commitment to being the bonfire, It is the radical shift from seeing obstacles as things that are in your way to seeing obstacles as the way itself. When you lose your job, Amoffati says, "Good, I had grown stagnant. Now I am forced to discover what else I am capable of." When a relationship ends, it says, "Good, I am now free to find someone who truly aligns with my soul." When you are stuck in traffic, it says, "Good, I have 30 minutes to listen to a book and practice my patience." Happiness cannot exist in a state of constant resistance to reality. If you are always fighting against what is, wishing it were something else, you will live in perpetual misery. Amoffati teaches us that every hardship, every delay, and every tragedy is raw material for us to practice virtue, resilience, and courage. Do not just bear your struggles, embrace them. They are the weights in the gymnasium of life, placed there specifically to make you stronger. 4. The power of the pause. In the year 300 BC, a Phoenician merchant named Zeno set sail on the Mediterranean Sea, carrying a massive fortune in purple dye. In the ancient world, Tyrian purple was rarer than gold, extracted painstakingly from sea snails, and worn exclusively by royalty. Zeno's entire life's work, his identity, and his future were tied up in that cargo. A violent storm struck. The ship was torn apart, and the cargo sank to the bottom of the ocean. Zeno washed ashore in Athens, shipwrecked, penniless, and entirely stripped of his former life. Most men would have cursed the gods, collapsed into depression, or taken their own lives. Zeno, however, wandered into an Athenian bookstore, picked up a book on philosophy, and was mesmerized. He soon began studying under the great philosophers of the city and eventually founded his own school of thought on a public porch, or stoa. This was the birth of Stoicism. Looking back on the disaster that ruined his life, Zeno famously joked, "Fortune bids me to be a less cluttered philosopher." How did Zeno achieve this? He mastered the space between stimulus and response. The Stoics believed that we do not react directly to events. We react to our judgments about those events. Between the moment an event happens, the stimulus, and the moment you react to it, the response, there is a split second of time. In that pause lies your ultimate freedom. When someone insults you, the immediate instinctual reaction is anger. But if you can widen that pause, you give yourself the opportunity to evaluate the insult. Who is this person? Does their opinion matter? Is what they said true? If it is true, why am I angry? If it is false, why should I care? To live a happy life, you must stop operating on autopilot. You must train yourself to catch that brief moment of space before you lash out in anger, before you send that emotionally charged email, before you break down in despair. In that pause, you step back, observe your rising emotions without judgment, and then choose a response that aligns with logic and virtue rather than blind impulse. 5. Practice. Deliberate discomfort. We live in an age that worships comfort. We want our food delivered instantly, our homes perfectly climate-controlled, and our beds as soft as possible. But the Stoics warned that a life of unbroken comfort is actually a trap. Cato the Younger, a prominent Roman senator, and one of the most hardcore Stoics of his era, was famous for his bizarre habits. Despite having the immense wealth of a Roman aristocrat, Cato would deliberately wear dark, out-of-style clothing. He would walk the streets of Rome barefoot, exposing himself to the harsh sun or the freezing rain. He would occasionally eat the meager rations of a common soldier, rather than the delicacies afforded to his class. Why would a rich man intentionally make himself suffer? Cato was practicing deliberate discomfort. He knew that if he allowed himself to become addicted to luxury, he would become a slave to it. He would live in constant fear of losing his wealth, his status, and his comfort. By voluntarily exposing himself to poverty, ridicule, and physical hardship, he immunized himself against the fear of them. He proved to himself, viscerally, that he could survive just fine without the soft things in life. Happiness requires a sense of invincibility. It is the deep, quiet confidence of knowing that no matter what the economy does, no matter what happens to your bank account or your social standing, you will be okay. You do not need to walk barefoot through a Roman winter to practice this. You can practice deliberate discomfort today. Take a cold shower for 3 minutes. Fast for a day. Leave your phone at home while you go for a long walk. Sleep on the floor for 1 night. By occasionally subjecting yourself to small, voluntary hardships, you break the chains of your dependencies. You remind yourself that your happiness is not tethered to external luxuries, but to your internal fortitude. If you have secured your internal foundation and adjusted the lens through which you view adversity, you must now confront the final frontier of a well-lived life, how you manage the relentless, unstoppable march of time. 6. Treat time as your most precious asset. Imagine a man who guards his bank account with ferocious intensity. If someone were to steal $100 from him, he would call the police, press charges, and spend weeks fuming over the injustice. Yet this same man will gladly allow a toxic coworker to complain to him for an hour. He will spend 4 hours endlessly scrolling through a digital feed of strangers' lives. He will waste entire weekends doing things he hates out of a misplaced sense of obligation to people he barely likes. Seneca observed this tragedy in ancient Rome and penned a brilliant essay titled On the Shortness of Life. In it, he wrote, "People are frugal in guarding their personal property, but as soon as it comes to squandering time, they are most wasteful of the one thing in which it is right to be stingy. Time is the ultimate non-renewable resource. You can always make another dollar. You can always buy a new house. You can even lose your health and sometimes win it back. But you cannot buy back a single second of the time you have spent. Once an hour passes, it is gone into the void of eternity forever." The Stoics believed that a happy life is impossible if you do not fiercely protect your time. Most people live as if they have an infinite supply of days. We tell ourselves, "I will write that book when I retire," or "I will spend more time with my kids when this project is over," or "I will finally take that trip next year." Seneca called this the greatest delusion of humanity. You are not guaranteed tomorrow. You are not even guaranteed the end of this day. To live a truly fulfilling life, you must become ruthlessly protective of your calendar. Stop giving your time away to meaningless arguments on the internet. Stop saying yes to obligations out of guilt. Start treating your hours like millions of dollars. Spend them intentionally. Invest them in the people you love, the pursuits that ignite your soul, and the quiet moments of reflection that keep your mind sharp. Recognize that every time you say yes to something trivial, you are saying no to a fraction of your own finite existence. 7. Anchor yourself in the eternal. Now, on the frozen, muddy banks of the Danube River, surrounded by the chaos of war, Emperor Marcus Aurelius sat alone in his tent by candlelight. The Roman Empire was under constant threat. His political enemies were plotting against him back home, and the burden of leadership was almost too heavy for one man to bear. Yet, in his private diary, which we now know as Meditations, Marcus did not write about his anxieties for the future or his regrets about the past. He wrote commands to himself to stay fiercely rooted in the present moment. Confine yourself to the present, he reminded himself. Every man lives only this present moment, this fleeting instant. The rest of his life is either past and gone, or not yet revealed. Human beings have a unique and often agonizing ability to time travel in our minds. We spend massive portions of our lives mentally living in the past, ruminating over old mistakes, nursing old grudges, and replaying conversations that happened years ago. Alternatively, we sprint into the future, mapping out anxieties, dreading upcoming tasks, and bracing for tragedies that have not yet occurred. The Stoic secret to happiness is the realization that the past and the future are illusions. The past is dead. It exists nowhere except in the firing synapses of your memory. The future is a ghost. It is entirely unwritten and largely out of your control. The only thing that is real, the only place where life actually happens, the only domain where you have any agency, is right now. The present second. When you feel overwhelmed by the sheer volume of tasks you have to accomplish, or crushed by the weight of an uncertain future, you must pull your mind back to the present. You do not have to survive the rest of your life right now. You only have to survive this exact moment. You only have to take this specific breath, write this specific sentence, or endure this specific wave of pain. By anchoring yourself entirely in the present, the impossible weight of life becomes remarkably light. You stop carrying the baggage of yesterday and the dread of tomorrow. You become fully immersed in the task at hand, bringing the full force of your attention and energy to the only reality that actually exists. There is a persistent, dangerous myth about Stoicism, that it is a philosophy for the cold, the isolated, and the emotionless. People imagine a Stoic as a lone wolf sitting on a mountaintop, completely detached from the messy, emotional reality of human relationships. Nothing could be further from the truth. The Stoics were deeply engaged in society. They were politicians, generals, teachers, and merchants. They understood that to live a happy life, you must know how to navigate the complex, often frustrating web of humanity without losing your own peace. 8. Cultivate sympathia. You are not an island. Every morning, Marcus Aurelius woke up in a palace surrounded by political climbers, sycophants, and traitors. Before he ever left his chambers, he wrote these words in his journal. Begin the morning by saying to yourself, I shall meet with the busybody, the ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, envious, unsocial. He did not write this to make himself cynical or depressed. He wrote it to prepare himself, so that he would not be shocked when human beings acted like human beings. But the crucial part of his morning reflection is what came next. Marcus reminded himself that these people behave terribly because they are ignorant of what is truly good and evil. More importantly, he recognized that he was connected to them. The Stoics held a profound belief in a concept called sympathia, the idea that all things are mutually interdependent, and that humanity is a single, massive organism. Marcus viewed humanity like a human body. He wrote that we were born to work together, like feet, hands, and eyes, like the rows of the upper and lower teeth. To turn against another person, to harbor bitter hatred, or to seek cruel revenge is as unnatural as the left hand attacking the right hand. In the year 175 AD, a trusted general and friend of Marcus Aurelius, a man named Avidius Cassius, betrayed him. Believing Marcus to be dying of an illness, Cassius declared himself emperor of Rome and began a usurpation. In the ancient world, the punishment for treason was swift, brutal, and absolute. The traitor's entire family would be slaughtered to prevent future uprisings. When Marcus found out about the betrayal, he did not fly into a rage. Instead, historical accounts suggest he was deeply saddened, not because he had lost power, but because he was robbed of the opportunity to grant his old friend forgiveness. Before Marcus could reach him, Cassius was assassinated by his own soldiers. Marcus wept. He explicitly ordered that Cassius's family be left entirely unharmed and pardoned those who had supported the rebellion. Why? Because Marcus understood sympathia. He knew that destroying the people around him would only poison the empire and corrupt his own soul. To live a happy life, you must drop the burden of resentment. When someone cuts you off in traffic, when a co-worker takes credit for your work, or when a friend lets you down, your ego demands that you carry a burning coal of anger in your chest. But holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. True happiness requires radical empathy. It requires seeing the flawed humanity in others, forgiving their trespasses, and recognizing that we are all stumbling through the dark, trying to figure out this difficult life together. 9. Destroy your ego and remain a student. Epictetus observed that the greatest obstacle to wisdom, and therefore to happiness, is our own arrogance. He famously stated, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. Ego is the enemy of happiness, because ego is incredibly fragile." When you believe you are the smartest person in the room, when you believe your opinions are absolute facts, and when you tie your identity to being right, you have to spend an enormous amount of psychological energy defending that illusion. Every dissenting opinion feels like a personal attack. Every piece of constructive criticism feels like a declaration of war. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, learned this lesson the hard way. When Zeno first arrived in Athens, he was a wealthy, proud son of a merchant. He began studying under a famous Cynic philosopher named Crates. Crates immediately recognized that Zeno was overly concerned with public image, social status, and looking dignified. To cure him of this ego, Crates handed Zeno a heavy clay pot full of lentil soup and asked him to carry it through the most crowded district of the city. Zeno, embarrassed by carrying poor man's food, tried to hide the pot under his cloak. Seeing this, Crates took his staff and smashed the pot. The thick, messy lentil soup exploded all over Zeno's expensive clothes, running down his legs in front of the entire laughing marketplace. Humiliated, Zeno turned and tried to run away. Crates laughed and yelled after him, "Why run away, my little Phoenician? Nothing terrible has befallen you." Crates was showing Zeno that his embarrassment was entirely self-inflicted. The soup didn't hurt him, his ego did. His desperate need to look good and maintain his status was the only thing causing his pain. We live in a modern society that encourages ego. Social media conditions us to build heavily curated avatars of ourselves, fiercely defending our tribes and our viewpoints. But this creates a brittle, anxious existence. To be truly happy, you must let go of the heavy, exhausting armor of ego. Adopt the mindset of a lifelong student. Allow yourself to be wrong. When you make a mistake, own it immediately without making excuses. When you let go of the need to be perceived as perfect, you free up massive amounts of mental space. You become unoffendable, flexible, and deeply at peace. Philosophy is not a spectator sport. It is not something you merely read about in an armchair. It is something you do. The Stoics had very little patience for people who memorized complex theories, but failed to apply them to their actual lives. In this stage of the journey, we must bridge the gap between knowing what is right and actually doing it. 10. Stop debating and embody virtue. Marcus Aurelius wrote one of the most powerful, cutting directives in all of his meditations. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Human beings love to theorize. We love to debate ethics, politics, and the best ways to live. We consume podcasts, read self-help books, watch documentaries, and fill our minds with endless streams of advice. Yet, how often do we actually change our behavior? It is far easier to argue about the definition of justice on the internet than it is to act justly when no one is watching. It is easier to read a book about patience than it is to stay calm when your toddler spills milk all over the freshly cleaned floor. The Stoics called this preference for action facta, non verba, deeds, not words. Consider the life of Cato the Younger. During the final decaying days of the Roman Republic, political corruption was the absolute norm. Bribery, extortion, and violence were standard political tactics used by everyone, including Julius Caesar. Cato, however, refused to play the game. He didn't just write essays complaining about corruption. He lived as a walking, breathing antithesis to it. When Cato ran for high office, he absolutely refused to bribe the voting blocks, a practice that was so common it was essentially expected. Because he refused to compromise his integrity, he lost the election. His friends urged him to bend the rules just a little bit for the greater good, but Cato refused. He proved that he would rather fail with his soul intact than succeed through moral compromise. True happiness, deep, quiet, unshakable contentment, comes from the alignment of your beliefs and your actions. When there is a gap between who you claim to be and how you actually behave, your subconscious knows it. This hypocrisy creates a quiet, low-level anxiety that gnaws at you. You feel like an imposter. But when you stop talking about your values and simply start embodying them, that anxiety vanishes. Stop telling people about your diet. Eat healthy. Stop telling people you are a loyal friend. Show up for them when it's inconvenient. Stop debating the nuances of moral philosophy. Go out into the world and do the right thing. Let your life be your argument. 11. Let death be your ultimate clarifier, memento mori. Of all the tools in the Stoic arsenal, perhaps none is more misunderstood than memento mori, the meditation on mortality. Translated from Latin, it means, remember you must die. To the modern mind, obsessing over death sounds morbid, depressing, and dark. We have built entire industries designed to hide death from our view. We use anti-aging creams, we put our sick in sterile hospitals out of sight, and we avoid the topic at dinner parties. We live in a society of profound death denial. Seneca believed this denial was the root of immense suffering. In his letters, he warned that we look at death the wrong way. We look at death as an event sitting far off in the distance, waiting for us at the end of our timeline. Seneca corrected this illusion. This is our big mistake, to think we look forward to death. Most of death is already gone. Whatever time has passed is owned by death. Death is not an event in the future. It is a process happening to you right now. Every minute you breathe is a minute you will never get back. You are dying right now. In ancient Rome, when a victorious general returned from a successful military campaign, he would be granted a triumph. He would ride through the streets of Rome in a golden chariot, wearing a purple toga, while the crowds cheered his name. He was treated like a god. But Stoic tradition dictates that a slave would stand behind the general in the chariot, holding a golden crown over his head, continually whispering in his ear, Respis post te, hominem te esse memento, memento mori. Look behind you. Remember you are a man. Remember you must die. Why would they ruin the best day of this man's life with a reminder of his death? Because the reminder of death doesn't ruin life, it clarifies it. When you truly internalize the fact that you are mortal, your priorities snap into violent, immediate focus. Suddenly, holding a grudge against your sibling for 5 years seems absurd. Agonizing over an embarrassing thing you said at a party seems ridiculous. Spending 3 hours scrolling through a social media feed feels like the tragedy that it is. Memento mori is the ultimate filter for the trivialities of life. When you are paralyzed by the fear of failure, the fear of judgment, or the fear of taking a risk, ask yourself, I am going to be dead soon, and everyone judging me will be dead soon. Why on earth am I letting fear dictate my few remaining days? To live a happy life, you must keep death perched on your shoulder. Let it advise you. Let it strip away the superficial nonsense and leave you only with what is truly meaningful. We have built the foundation of control, shifted our perceptions, managed our time, connected with our fellow humans, and aligned our actions. Now, we reach the summit of the Stoic mountain. What is the ultimate purpose of all this effort? It is the pursuit of what the ancient Greeks called eudaimonia. 12. Cultivate eudaimonia, your inner fortress. Often translated poorly as simply happiness, eudaimonia means something much deeper. It translates closer to human flourishing, or being on good terms with your highest inner self. The Stoics argued that the vast majority of people look for eudaimonia in the wrong places. We look for it in wealth, status, physical beauty, and career success. The Stoics classified all of these things as preferred indifference. It is fine to prefer having money over being poor. It is fine to prefer being healthy over being sick. But these things are indifferent to your ultimate moral character. You can be a billionaire and be deeply miserable, corrupt, and hollow. You can be chronically ill and possess an unshakable, beautiful soul. Therefore, the ultimate key to a happy life is the realization that virtue is the only true good. The Stoic operating system is built on 4 cardinal virtues. 1. Practical wisdom, the ability to navigate complex situations logically, calmly, and rationally. 2. Courage, not just physical bravery, but the moral courage to do what is right, to face the truth, and to endure hardship. 3. Justice, treating others with fairness, empathy, and integrity, recognizing our shared humanity. 4. Temperance, self-mastery, discipline, and the ability to choose long-term fulfillment over short-term gratification. To the Stoics, a happy life is simply a life spent cultivating these 4 virtues. If you do this, your character becomes a fortress that absolutely nothing in the external world can penetrate. Consider the story of a Roman senator named Pausanias Agrippinus. He was a devout Stoic, living under the tyrannical reign of Emperor Nero. One day, while Agrippinus was going about his business, a messenger arrived with terrible news. The emperor had officially decreed that Agrippinus was to be stripped of his wealth and exiled from Italy forever. He would lose his home, his status, and his comfort. Agrippinus looked at the messenger, then looked at the time. He turned to his friends and said, "Very well, it is the 5th hour. Let us go dine in Aricia." Aricia was the first stop on the road out of Rome. He did not cry. He did not beg. He simply went to lunch. Agrippinus had built an internal fortress of character so strong that the emperor of Rome could not touch his happiness. He knew that Nero could confiscate his estate, but Nero could not confiscate his courage. Nero could banish him from Italy, but Nero could not banish his wisdom. His character was his own, and because his character was intact, he was untouched by the tragedy. This is the ultimate promise of Stoicism. When you tie your happiness to your character rather than your circumstances, you become invincible. The stock market can crash, and you will respond with temperance. You can face a devastating health diagnosis, and you will respond with courage. You can be betrayed by a friend, and you will respond with justice. You stop asking the universe to give you an easy life, and you start asking the universe to give you the strength to endure a difficult one. You realize that your destiny is not written by the stars, the economy, or your parents. Your destiny is written by your own choices. Your character is your destiny. You now have the roadmap. 12 ancient keys to unlocking a fortress of peace within your own mind. But remember, philosophy without action is just entertainment. Don't let this be another video you consume and forget. Choose one principle today and change your life. If this wisdom brought you value, please hit the like button to tell the algorithm to spread this message, share it with a friend who needs it, and subscribe for more. Keep building your inner citadel.